see where and why we think and act different or not. All this information will be shared with us, but Ewout van den Engel, I hope I didn't say it wrong, a Dutch author of the Working with the Romanians from a Dutch Perspective book published in 2020. In his book, he combines a specific perspective with the experiences of Dutch entrepreneurs active in Romania. Now, I think the best thing is to give the mic to you, and we look forward to hear your presentation.
Okay, thank you. Let's be going then. Let me see how this works. Okay, sorry. I just do it like this. Sorry for the...
Before you start, I just want to add one more thing, that I will ask everybody to hold your mic on mute, so there will be no sorry. To have no problems with the sound. And if you have any questions, please put them, write them down in the chat box, and we will answer at the end of the webinar in the Q&A session. Thank you.
Okay, welcome everybody. Let me see. So we'll go like this. Yeah. Welcome everybody. I hope you had a valuable week of exploring business in the Netherlands up until now. My name is Ewout van den Engel, and I graduated as a cultural scientist from Maastricht University over 10 years ago. I moved to Bucharest about 6 years ago, and I am presently a writer on culture and identity. And as mentioned, my last book was on Romanian and Dutch business culture, and that's also what we will be talking today about. If we want to understand another culture, in our case, the Dutch culture, it's important that we first become conscious of our own culture. The Romanian national culture has developed as a reaction to environmental, economical, political circumstances over the last 2 millennia, so over the last 2,000 years. So what we observe as we zoom out is that the Romanian territory has always been rich, and the climate has always been very pleasant, except of course for the winter months. And this also made it a prime target for other cultures. So the biggest challenges that Romanians had to face since their origin were in fact other people. Romania has been incorporated or closely linked to the Roman Empire, Ottoman Empire, Habsburg Empire, and most recently to the Soviet Empire. When we look at religion in Romania, we can see it has been Christianized also far sooner than the Netherlands, under Roman influence. And since then, the Orthodox faith hasn't changed as much, or hasn't changed almost at all. Part of these developments we can recognize in the Romanian language. Language takes up words from cultures that are culturally, politically, or economically more powerful. If we look at the Romanian language, we see a Latin base, on which on top came Slavic influences, Cuman or Turkish influences, Hungarian influences, Austrian and German influences, and of course, French influence. And as you can see, or already deferred, the cultural influence is closely tied to its geographical position. Let's then have a look at the Dutch culture. Firstly, the Netherlands have most of the time been able to avoid being incorporated into larger centralized empires. In fact, its main enemy was nature, so wind, water, swamps, you name it, just not mountains, we don't have them. And if you want to fight these natural elements, this requires organization in very small autonomous groups. In comparison to Romania, Christianity arrived late in the Netherlands, and it also underwent more revisions. So after the Christianity broke up into an Eastern and a Western variant, we first had Catholicism, then Protestantism, and now the majority of the Dutch do not even consider themselves religious. So we can already say that the Dutch are less traditional than the Romanians. But looking at the language, we see that the Dutch have been influenced by a variety of cultures. The Dutch language has a Germanic base, which includes words that are similar in German, English, and Swedish. So think about water, bread, the word for road, but of course that's different in English. But everything that from an outsider perspective looks that is either German or it's English. We also see an early Latin influence. This is mainly due to the Catholic Church, and then influenced by African and Asian cultures. This is a result of trading and of colonialism. And then we also have German and English influence in the language, and this is mainly due to science and trade. So if we already have a look and we compare these two, then we see that both Romania and the Netherlands have a Latin influence, but not as one as a base and the other one as a influence that came later. We're both influenced by the French, but Romanians are more influenced by the French, and the Dutch are more influenced by the Germans. You've been influenced by Turkish and Hungarians, and we've been influenced by Africans and Asians, but to a lesser extent. So statistical cultural research has shown that the historical developments and cultural influence mentioned have left their mark until the present day. The most extensive research on this topic has been conducted by the Dutch scientist Geert Hofstede, and part of his research has also been repeated by Romanian business consultant Adina Luca. It's important to realize that the graph we're seeing, this is part of a bigger comparison of about 70 world cultures, it isn't static and it isn't absolute. It rather explains or it predicts how for instance, a Romanian will experience being part of Dutch culture. The downside of these numbers is that they only give insight into the cultural differences and not in the similarities. And as we already saw, we both have a Christian heritage. We shared most of the same symbols. We have a shared European identity. Still, it's the differences we are mostly concerned about when we travel abroad. So let's dive into the business aspect of culture. Very briefly about this graph, by the way. So on the left, we have hierarchy. This is how we think power has to go along with status, and if we think that power should be distributed evenly or not. So in Romania, it's more accepted that power is not distributed evenly. We will have a look at it a bit later, or at least at the Dutch perspective. And in the Netherlands, we think that everybody should have a say. Then the Dutch are more individualistic, and the Romanian culture is more of a group culture. So you think first about the other person and then about yourself. In the Netherlands, it's more the other way around. The Netherlands, as we already saw with religion, is less traditional than Romania. We also see that how women are treated in the Netherlands. Women are treated as equal, but in every sense. And it's frowned upon if you don't treat women as equal. So holding open the door, things like Women's Day, we don't really celebrate. We don't have things like Marti Shore, etc. And we'll get into the other things. They're not so important for doing business. So, but if you have questions later on, I can explain. Let's first look at hierarchy. So the word baas comes from the Dutch word baas, which has the same meaning. The Dutch, however, have an ambiguous attitude towards this word because it also translates in English as master. And as my father used to say, alleen een hond heeft een baas, only a dog has a master. So the Dutch try to avoid looking and acting like a boss. Almost in every Dutch sector, except the banking sector and also the hospital sector, democratic leadership is the norm. This explains partly why Dutch team meetings seem to drag on without an end. It takes very long before decisions are made. And this is because the boss is always aiming for consensus and every opinion counts. Also, the cleaner's opinion counts. So it doesn't really matter what your function is within an organization. Everybody is obliged to listen to you anyway. Part of this culture is that the Dutch share their opinions openly, while offense is never attended. Dutch children are taught to have an opinion and not to take criticism personal. So at work, your results might be bad, but you as a person are still perfect. Showing your status, as mentioned, it's frowned upon. So Dutch bosses don't show expensive watches. They don't dress very exuberant. They don't show that they have very nice cars, but they don't show their nice car. And we also see this in business. So when we talk about business casual in the Netherlands, it's very, very casual. For instance, on the right side of the screen, you see a Dutch newspaper clipping from 2019. And it looks kind of like a family reunion, but it's actually an article on an inspiration meeting the Dutch government had. And if you look closely at the picture, you'll recognize the prime minister, you'll recognize ministers, and you'll recognize state secretaries. Just look at this picture, and then you probably will never imagine a Romanian government having an official picture moment like this. In Dutch culture, the company employees and the management share the same goal, namely to make the company grow and prosper. This is partially because their shared interest is understood. If the company does well, everybody can get paid, and there might even be room for a raise. On the other part, Dutch job performance has to do with how the job reflects on the personal image and pride. If a person does their job well, they will feel good about themselves. If their result is bad, they will feel bad about themselves. Doing your job well does not necessarily mean following all the instructions by the letter, so following procedures. You look at the end goal. So you do not do what you're asked to do, but you do what is necessary to make the customer satisfied. As said about religion, the Dutch tend to stick less to the status quo and embrace change. They constantly look for ways to save money, but it doesn't mean they compromise too much on quality. When innovating, saving money, they focus on future benefits and less on the short-term benefits. To give an example, the dikes in the Netherlands protect about 70% of GDP, and they are actually built to withstand storms that only happen once in every 10,000 years. And every time they're renovated, they're also renovated with the intent to protect the country for another 50 years. On the short term, building and maintaining dikes costs an exorbitant amount of money, billions, really billions. But on the long term, it protects 70% of GDP. So that's kind of the way the Dutch look at it. But we'll talk a bit more about communication style. If there's a question now, for me, it's also okay to answer them because we're with a small group. Otherwise, I'll just continue. Okay. Good communication culture. The Dutch communication culture reflects its cultural values. So it's important to keep, first of all, it's important to keep in mind that things like body language, tone of voice, fear of insulting the other person, they do not play a big role in Dutch communication culture. The spoken information is, or better to say, when we speak, all the information is contained in the words we say, and it's not in how it's being said. So the Dutch, because of this, the Dutch also don't filter on things like body language, tone of voice, or not as much as Romanians. So Romanians are more equipped in communicating in an emotional way and also understanding when it's, for instance, a no or a yes, it might be the opposite. In the Netherlands, it's people are more accustomed to have a very clear kind of communication. This is because clear communication equals honesty. And at the same time, if you communicate indirectly, it might seem as you will be hiding the truth. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. Sometimes there's a mistake that Dutch people make a promise, but because it's hard also for other Dutch people to interpret if this is a promise or it's more like I'll do my best for you, but it's not a guarantee. It's always good to ask for a written agreement or some kind of written confirmation. Or if you're not sure if something is a promise or it's a guarantee, just ask, could you put me that in writing? And then you'll find out quite quickly, because Dutch person is likely not to write something down that they've, because words bind in the Netherlands. More than in Romania. In Romania, they also bind. With communication, keep in mind that the Dutch communicate from their own perspective, so not from the group perspective. Everybody is regarded as an individual, and you should not hesitate to speak your thoughts or to think. You never think that your interests are kept in mind if you don't speak up. So always speak up in meetings, in the meeting, not outside the meeting, and make your voice clear. There's not fear for repercussion, but otherwise people don't take your opinion into account. So what they don't know, they won't imagine they know. When Dutch people meet for the first time, they mostly bond by expressing their opinions. These are not fixed opinions. They're not really well thought over, but they are meant to create a discussion. Questions and opinions in these discussions can become very intrusive and very personal. And outsiders put it in a biblical terms, is that Dutch want to taste your kidneys. It has a function. It's the fastest way for both sides to see if they want to do business together. In other cultures, for instance, in the Romanian culture, maybe you'll have dinner together, have some drinks, might need several meetings to trust each other, and this is not the case in the Netherlands. So in the Netherlands, trust is not something that's nurtured over time, but it's rather a given that can be lost over time. So it's the other way around than in Romania. Since Dutch culture is transactional, it's kind of like you get money from the bank, you stick something in and you get some money in return. Romanian culture is relational. It means it's not based on long introductions. And formalizing agreements is the key. So more than in Romania, in the Netherlands, it's the contract that defines the relationship. It's more than a formality. It's what binds you. This means that if you move away from the contract, and this includes work contracts, you are damaging the relationship and you are damaging the trust. So the Dutch believe in written agreements and they believe in them because they think they reflect reality. And if you deviate from reality, you undermine their trust. If you look at negotiations, the negotiation culture in the Netherlands is considered linear. So this means that the negotiations go in a predictable fashion. So from meeting each other, having a small chat, certain stages towards signing a contract. And there's no real room for side discussions. So this includes personal discussions or things that are aimed to increase the relationship. Negotiation is cut in stages. And unless you explicitly mention agreements are reached inside the meeting, not after. So everything always happens inside of the meeting. It's not appreciated if you go back on a promise you make, or if you try to renegotiate a contract after the contract is finalized. Of course, what you can do is you can say, but you have to be open about this. I cannot make an opinion on this yet. I have to think about this. I'll let you know later. Please keep in mind that decision-making in the Netherlands might be delegated. So in other words, you don't always have to speak to the director to make a deal. It's fine only to talk to a head of a department or a specialist or a buyer. Maybe the director will pop up to say hello, but normally it's quite normal to talk to different levels. So you might be the director of your company, but in the Netherlands, you might be talking to the head of a department or the buyer or something. One thing with the opening bid, in case you are negotiating tariffs, in Romania, it's sometimes a bit more. There are two things in Romania that are different from the Netherlands. First of all, concerning amounts, is in Romania is a bit more masculine country. So you exaggerate the amount you want to have. Normally you put 30% on the price you actually want to have. And the other person is expected then to negotiate you down. And then in the end, you both feel like a winner. In the Netherlands, if you give an inflated price like this, they will take it for what it is. They think you're too expensive and they might not even negotiate with you. So it's important to keep this in mind and to try to come with a realistic pricing. Of course, it should be a bit more expensive, but don't go overboard. Okay. Good. There's some taboos about in the Netherlands we should talk about. Oh wait, this is right. First of all, oh sorry. The Dutch, they don't boast a lot about their wealth. So there might be some topics you want to avoid or be very indirect about when you discuss with a Dutch business partner. In case you want to impress somebody by talking about their personal or national success, this might be seen as bragging. So if you start to explain how all the world wonders you have in Romania, I mean the power plants at the Danube, Lago Bicaz, the big dams you have, the parliament. People might think you're a bragger and that it might not, it doesn't reflect well in your personality. We see this also in customer satisfaction, but in the other way. So it's very rare in the Netherlands to get a 5-star rating or to get a 10. A 10 is something we're taught in school that only God gets. And as we don't, the majority doesn't believe in God anymore, it's very rare to get a 10. For instance, with books I write, I normally get an email with there's a review and the review sounds perfect. And you think this is going to be a 10 and in the end you have 8 out of 10, which is still very good, But since I now moved to Romania, I always believe in when somebody's very positive, it will be a 10. Another part very important is that a substantial part of the Dutch is very sensitive about any remarks that might imply a distinction between social groups or stereotype. There's a deeply ingrained idea that simply naming differences between people or a group on a group level is a bad thing. So you want to avoid making any remarks about other people unless they might be positive. But neutral things, but just already remarking something, making a difference, can be seen as a bad thing. So it's better to avoid this. The same as I mentioned, it goes for treating women differently. It includes holding the door open for a woman, giving flowers to a woman on Women's Day, letting them leave the elevator first. By doing this, you inadvertently imply that women are not equal to men, which in turn might be interpreted as sexist. To be honest, I thought my presentation would be longer because we're already coming to the conclusion, but this leaves some time for discussion. And I'll flip back the slide towards the comparison with the Hofstede results, because I believe I have something more to say about these. First of all, to keep in mind, the Dutch, they don't work for the boss, but they work for the customer. They look at long-term advantages. So also when you pitch an idea, it's very important to include benefits that are there for the long term. Dutch management always thinks in a strategic manner. They don't really run the business from day to day. That's seen as something for either the employee themselves or for their team leaders. So they look at future planning. So if you're pitching towards them, they want to know how can your product or your service help them from now to 5 years. It's very important to the belief in the written and spoken language is very important to remember. So try to avoid indirect language. Also, we haven't covered this, but Romanians, more than Dutch people, make little theories about how people might have interpreted what they said, or they try to read the body language, because this is what you do as a culture. You're more relational, we're more transactional. Since the Dutch don't really radiate a lot of body language, you might be trying to read a book that's not there. So keep this in mind and go more towards the see is what you see is what you get approach. Also important, Dutch people smile more than Romanians. And this is more when you meet somebody for the first time. Romanians, they normally smile because they're happy, because they smile when they have a sincere emotion. But when they meet somebody for the first time, they tend to be more serious and a bit more closed, because they don't want the other person to think that they might be laughing about them or they don't take the other person serious. In the Netherlands, it's a bit turned around, and smiling is impolite. So when you receive a smile, it's not so much that the person doesn't take you serious, or it doesn't mean all men are flirting or all women are flirting. It's just a sympathetic gesture they do. And as mentioned, Dutch think equality is very important. Normally, this is already where where I get to my questions. But I'll get back to the Hofstede. I don't know if somebody has questions, because I haven't covered as much as I can cover.
Thank you. So if there is anyone wanting to ask something, please do it now. Very interesting presentation. So
I would like to ask something. Hello?
Hi.
Do you hear me?
I do, yeah.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation. It was very interesting. I wanted to ask you if you had any taboos you encountered in Romania as a Dutch.
Many taboos. So first taboo, this is, by the way, if you see my screen, taboos are on the indulgence side, totally on the right side. So indulgence means actually how permissive your culture is. So in the Netherlands, you have we of course have a very liberal soft drugs policy with marijuana. Prostitution is legal. People can express their opinions a lot. As was said yesterday in the presentation, everybody's very open to gay people, etc. In Romania, you have these social norms that are far more restrictive. So then you see that their indulgence has a lower score. First thing what Dutch people tend to do at work, what Romanians don't do, is they take off their shoes if they are hot. And also Dutch are more, it's normal for Dutch people to, for instance, I'll give you an example. So in the beginning in Romania, because it was very hot inside, I took off my shoes now and then. Also my other Dutch colleagues did, and it was really frowned upon, and people came to us and said we shouldn't do that. The same as when you have like a little stone in your shoe and you're in the metro and you try to take your shoe off. Romanians also get a bit panicked when they see your foot. I forgot what the other thing. So that's one thing. And so that's one of the taboos I had in Romania. Then the taboo for smiling. I know in my first job, I was just a happy, friendly Dutch person walking around. And not all of them, but some of the more traditional Romanians, it took them a while to get accustomed to the fact that I was cheerful. because they thought I might be homosexual. And of course, that's also a bit bigger taboo in Romania. What I'm surprised about most of the time, this is what we actually see in the tradition, in the future mindedness. It has to do with traditions, or also superstition. So the reason why it's so hot, I have a child now here in Romania, and for instance, in summer when there was a heat wave, I had our baby girl was not wearing socks, and she was dressed very lightly, and it might have been a very small wind, but it was still 28 degrees. And people came to us to tell, hey, you should cover your baby a bit better. And we see this with more things. When for me, I think it's a normal temperature to still wear shorts, and also for our baby to be a bit more, not to dress too warm. For Romanians, it's already too cold. So Romanians have some bit more beliefs about about draft and about cold wind. They think it's bad for their health. And in the Netherlands, we have the opposite idea. So we like to open windows to air the rooms, because it's fresh air. We go to the beach just to get wind in our face and those kind of things. So that's kind of those are differences. And I have my issues here with sometimes I forget I'm in Romania and I don't let my neighbor pass through the door first, and then they get very angry. Yeah. It takes for me still some. I've been living in Romania now for over 6 years, and it's still an adjustment now and then. Some things are a lot nicer than in the Netherlands, and some things are less nice or more restrictive.
Yes, thank you. I think it would be an hour discussion about taboos in Romania, actually.
Yeah, yeah, but we should. I think it's very important with these differences that we
Overcome them.
Yeah, which we should accept the differences aren't always bad, and secondly, that they it's not like we're here in China, or that Romania is China. So I mean, it's not like we're totally different. We have totally different worlds, but because everything looks so similar, the differences stick out more.
Yes, thank you.
A pleasure.
Any other question?
If not, I have something to add.
Please.
Which is might be good for you to know, but it's something I normally avoid talking about. And that's because in the Netherlands you have, as you can see, you have a high, they measured a high individualism in the Netherlands, Hofstede, and a low and more collectivism, so low individualism in Romania. Same with hierarchy, high hierarchy in Romania, or I mean the other way around, and low hierarchy in the Netherlands. And this means that bosses in the Netherlands have other expectations from their employees than in Romania. So I talked about it briefly, but when you most Dutch that work here and that lead a company or that lead a team, they remark that the Romanians don't take initiative. And what they mean with this is they ask, for instance, hey, could you do this? I have a project. Would you be interested in leading the project? And you might say politely yes, and then nothing happens. And this has to do that in the Netherlands well, first of all, from a Romanian perspective, what happens according to cultural theory is that for Romanian, they need to have more details before they can start. And if they don't have details, they're kind of blocked. And the person who has to provide the details is the boss. In the Netherlands, it's the other way around. So you are expected to ask. And Dutch tend to stamina to tolerate uncertainty longer. So this kind of this idea that you don't know, they can go on with this. If you think about the the COVID measures in Romania, when COVID erupted, you had the army on the street within a few months. Everybody was wearing mouth masks. You weren't allowed to leave your home just to make sure that this virus doesn't spread. And around that time, still in the Netherlands, they were still discussing if they want to wear a mouth mask or not. Going back to my example, so from a Dutch perspective is you expect your employee to ask if he doesn't know, and you also expect them to be able to handle very vague assignments, because a manager in the Netherlands is not there to, let's say, help you do your job or guide you through your job. He or she is more there to facilitate your job. So the idea is you are the expert. I'm just the generalist, the Democrat. I'm just here to help you do your job. If you need something, come to me. I might show you the correct resources. But if I don't hear anything, I think everything is all right. So this is kind of how this perceived lack of initiative comes about.
But I have a question. I think the problem with the Romanians is that they are not encouraged to do this. Because basically when someone tries to go and have an opinion, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but usually the manager, they don't really want to hear it.
It's very interesting because I gave a workshop at a company a few months ago, and I had an example of a Belgium expat, and she was saying that she kept on having ideas to improve procedures, and our manager says, no, I don't want to hear about it, or I don't care, or those kind of things. And I asked everybody, do you recognize this situation? And they said no. And, but I still know this is, and they probably said no because half of them probably said no because they didn't recognize it. Maybe it's the Belgian part, and the other half probably said no because they didn't want to. It's a socially acceptable answer to say. I agree with what you say. From my experience, also what I saw from working in Romanian companies, it's a top-down way of management. And also things are taken personal in Romania. So as soon as you have an idea or an initiative, either you're changing the status quo and you're more traditional, so you don't want it anyway. I'm of course being a bit more black and white now. Or you are threatening in a way with your idea, you are threatening the position of your manager because he's the one who's supposed to take initiative. And also it's only the higher management in Romania normally takes the initiative and makes the plans. So also your manager in a way is only an employee of his manager. So they cannot really do much about it. It depends per company, of course, in Romania, but I've also noticed this. In the Netherlands, it's a bit different. If you want to you're expected to take initiative, otherwise you're a bad employee. In Romania, it's a bit more, if you just do your job, it's okay.
But I would have another question. Is this learned from the school? Like the kids from the school are taught to be more, I don't know, open to question or more individualist, or I don't know how to say exactly.
So what happens with so you have a Dutch child. A Dutch child is born in the family, and as soon as it can talk, it's allowed to express its opinion, and it's not so much a child but more a partner within the family. This also causes problems. Dutch are known on camping sites to be the Dutch kids are known in camping sites to be the loudest and to always make trouble, because they are not used to deal with authority. That's the other side of the medal. So what happens? So first you have the child is the partner and is supposed to express their opinion within the family. So what do you want to do today? Then it also gets possessions. In Romania, it's a bit less common for, now of course, with the country becoming more wealthy, also children are getting possessions. So you have your own toys, you don't have to share them, but it also gives an I to you. So you don't think about we. So who needs my teddy bear? You think, it's my teddy bear. Then in school, you go, so in the neighborhood, then also all kids are kind of seen as equals, just let's say a bit more, less intelligent, a little less responsible. And in school, you are trained to discuss with your teacher. So in Romania, you have to listen to your teacher. I also think it's a bit more strict. You, in some schools, you still have to stand up when the teacher comes in. You go inside and you are in rows. This is not the case in the Netherlands. So everything is a bit more chaotic. And the teacher really has to fight to have authority within the class, in the classroom. So in the Netherlands, they always strive for a good discussion and not to know the truth. And then the same you get at work. So at work, again, you your first job, you are expected to do your job. But your job, let's say you get a job in the supermarket, you have to unload a truck, nobody's there. Do you start unloading? In the Netherlands, you do, because what happens if you don't? Next time your boss comes, he shouts at you that you didn't start unloading the truck because you could have seen it. So this is kind of the way, the mentality, how it works. So it starts from child to neighborhood, to school, to first job, and also to university if you decide to go to university. By the way, it's not a problem. So always watch out with saying the problem in Romania is it's always I think the best thing you can do if you go to the Netherlands as a Romanian is do not think you are inferior or Romania is a worse country than the Netherlands. Dutch always have a very open culture. They look at all cultures to learn from, so they can also learn from the Romanian culture. Romanians always, well, I mean, from the data, they compare themselves to the West. And well, you only started to join the West 30 years ago, so you have a bit of a lag there. So it takes a while to get to the same level, and also for a society to change, even if it will change, because normally these things go very slow. So I wouldn't say it's a problem. It's rather it's a fact of life. And well, of course, on a personal level, it can be a problem. I always talk about groups. So you cannot, in a sociological way, you cannot talk about the problem. But it's of course the reason why a lot of people leave the country. One of the reasons.
But in 6 years since you've been here, have you seen a difference in how Romania has improved?
Well, first time I came to Romania was in 2005 for an internship in CBU. And certainly since joining the EU, it has improved a lot in services. Even some red tape went from the government. It's a bit easier to do business. So yeah, I'd say materialistically it improved, but at the same time, some problems seem to be a bit more structural, like this long-term thinking. If you just look at the bigger projects, infrastructural projects are a bit harder in Romania. They seem to manage and to complete than in the Netherlands.
Yeah, we are a little bit slow, so to say. But I really hope that things will change, hopefully. If there are any other questions from the audience?
I want to ask something, and I also see a question in the chat zone. I will let my colleague and then I will come back.
Okay, sorry, thank you for showing me. Roxana is asking, how does a great intro to a company should look like? What about the meetings?
An introduction, you mean getting into the company, or do you mean presenting yourself, let's say, as a business? Or
I think maybe, Roxana, if you can tell us. For cooperation purpose.
Okay, so you have a business, doesn't matter what. And you're, in this case, you are already pitching, or you are still want to get into the company? So you are going to, you want an invitation to pitch?
Want to get to know the company.
Okay. So for job or for business?
You can also ask live if you want. Maybe we can start the share screen and then people can ask directly.
I wasn't sure that. Please, yeah.
Yeah. She says wants to get to know the business.
Okay. So first thing is it doesn't work the same totally as in Romania. So in Romania, it's always best, also in the Netherlands, if you know a person in the company, but it's not obligatory. First thing, it's important, you just have to call the company and see who should be your contact person. I'm now doing the business one, I'll do the job one later. You should see who is your contact person. Try to get them on the phone, and then you can follow up by email. In the email, it's very important, although it's a country that really likes written information. At the same time, people don't really want to take a lot of time reading the information. So have some bullets with your unique selling points. First of all, it's who are you? Quick introduction. What's your specialty, and what can you offer the company? I've probably in the first part of your written introduction, you should specify what the problem is you're intending to solve for the company. So it's kind of the marketing bit. And then you just ask for if you could have, in this case, probably a Zoom call. If you could meet, if they are interested. And it's so important to have some kind of a flyer. And in the flyer, you should, depending what kind of company you are, if you are more artistic, you should have your portfolio. But it should also become clear, what can you do for that company? What's on the future? Why should they do business with you, but also for looking towards the future? So how can you help the company grow? This is always the question. How can you help the company grow in 5 years, for instance? What can you contribute? This is the thing Dutch companies are always looking for. How can you contribute? And they don't care too much about expertise or about diplomas. They just want to see an attitude. In the Netherlands, practical experience, depending on your domain, I mean, not with a doctor, let's say, but practical experience says more about you than a diploma per se. And also titles, most of the time, they are not so important as in Romania. And the same with a job. I used to be a recruiter also for the Dutch market. And it's still very much appreciated if you write a cover letter. And in the cover letter, you just have to touch all the points that are put in the vacancy, in the text. That's about I don't know if you have a follow-up question.
Thank you. I know Corina wanted to ask something.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to ask you, you are Dutch. What made you come to Romania? I mean, what attracted you to Romania? What would a Dutch find interesting or attractive in Romania?
It's funny because I asked about the same time as I moved to Romania. A Romanian friend of mine moved to the Netherlands, and he now moved back. I asked him also why. So I moved to Romania because it's a bit more. It's actually the reason why you leave most of the time. It's more unpredictable. Netherlands is very predictable, and it's very well governed. It's a bit too well governed, and it's not possible to do very spontaneous things in the Netherlands. I mean, on a personal level, it's even not on a personal level because everybody's agenda is booked until 3 months. So if you want to meet somebody for a beer, depending on how busy his social life is, you might take 2 months or something. I'm not exaggerating here. It's a bit more adventurous. also if you look at it, it's kind of the traffic is fun when you're first time you go and you're in a taxi and you see that the taxi driver drives like a madman, and that's very adventurous. At the moment, to be honest, living here, those are all the things I don't like about the country anymore. So it kind of changes. Romanians it's a bit more, even in the city, Romanians are more like, because of they're a bit more collective, so they're more social. I also lived in the south of the Netherlands, which is a bit more like Belgium and France, and for this reason also a bit more like Romania. But this is what I like about Romania a lot, because the people are more friendly, more open to talk, in case you speak Romanian. So if you don't speak Romanian, you don't have, it's a bit harder. But when you speak Romanian,
English helps. English helps. Many Romanians speak English.
I always start to meet. I always meet the nannies, the bunicas of Romania who want to talk to me, and people that have more time than I have, and so it's they don't mind that I don't understand everything. They just want to talk. So so that's what I like, and it's more adventurous. And of course, you have the access to the mountains, access to the beach. Those things are very beautiful, and it's very wide. I mean, we have the same amount of people, but you have, I don't know, I think the Netherlands fits 5 times in Romania, if you look at the surface. So you have a lot more space here. And your relationship with the government is very interesting. Romanian relationship, it's far more a relationship of saying yes and doing how you want it. It can be attractive. It's
maybe
more
flexibility.
You see this a lot in the other Romans cultures, because when you have a big centralized government, you can not really state your opinion to change things. So then you just do your own way. You just say yes, thank you, and you do your own way. Of course, this is also kind of a reason why it's hard to modernize Romania, because you have a lot of internal conflict, and you have a lot of internal interests. Think about the barons in the parties and stuff. In the Netherlands, in the south we have some kind of a party that's more like one with baroni, with people. Yeah, so this is kind of, for me, it's more exciting. But as my daughter will grow up, I probably will be looking to move back somewhere to a different school system, a bit more safer environment. But there's some small places in Romania where you can live, where you have this, where you have modern, even near Bucharest, you have I think it's Kitila, I think, and they now have this. They have take up a lot of European subsidies, and they have a smart school and a nice park and all these kind of things. So. Yeah, so I know no cultural experience is black or white. When you take the things you like, you will also get the things you don't like, and it's the same for the Netherlands.
Yes, thank you.
There is one more question from Dan Dragicescu. He says creativity in Holland is very high. What about sarcasm in Romania versus Holland?
So it's funny. First of all, the creativity is also what I interviewed the director of Fokker, so the airplane company, Fokker Romania. He's a Romanian for my book, and he was also saying the Dutch are very creative, but they don't know when to stop. So you have meetings that are going on, and somebody has a new idea that has to be discussed, and it's hard for them in those times to stay and to stay on topic. Dutch because the Dutch have more. Look more at words, and they look more at spoken. So they don't look too much at body language. It's hard for them to understand irony and sarcasm. And sometimes but they sometimes might interpret things as sarcasm. I don't think Romanians are very sarcastic, but I do think they're very ironic. And that's very, very hard for Dutch people to understand a bit more. Romanians are like absurd humor a bit more. so because you're also more used to the unpredictableness of life, and in the Netherlands, it's not appreciated too much. The humor in the Netherlands is more vulgar, more flat, more going from A to B, and not from A to C to Z, and you end up with a different situation.
Thank you very much. We reached 1 hour, so if there are any other questions, please write them down now, or if not, you can send them via email to the NRCC team.
I would
Please.
like to ask something also. Hello. Could you make some suggestions for a successful business meeting?
Are you visiting or are you receiving?
No, we are actually doing already business with somebody, with a company in the Netherlands. But I sometimes get the feeling that there was something missing in the meeting, you know?
So
Some small details.
So what Dutch people do, which is very different from Romanians, are the two things very different. One, Dutch people always come prepared to a meeting. So normally they're shorter and they already have their notes with things they want to discuss. So they think through what they want to discuss and their opinions before they enter the meeting. That's the first thing. So this is also something you should copy. What do I want to discuss? What reactions can I get in return, and how will I react to that? So you have to think a bit more in advance. A second, it's always important to have the minutes in the end. This is also something in Romania that's very rare to take minutes of a meeting. At higher levels, it's a bit more common. So everybody has the same conclusion going outside the meeting, and they can always, then when you have the next meeting, you can always ask, are there questions about the minutes? And then those things that were mentioned the last time might be mentioned then, because it comes to people's mind, or they say, I thought this wasn't clear, or could you add this? So just a very brief minutes, very brief report on the meeting. It doesn't have to be very detailed, just what did we decide, or what did we discuss about?
Thank you. If you could also leave your contact details, please, in the chat box, so the attendees can have them if they want to write to you.
They're on my last slide, but it's I will write them in the chat box.
Thank you.
You can always add me on LinkedIn. So this is my name. And my email. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thanks everybody for being here with us today. Hope you found the information very good for you. Thank you again, Ewout, for being the presenter of this interesting webinar. And I would also like to add, not to forget the webinars that will happen on the 10th of December, on Friday. One is starting with 11:30, Romanian Embassy in the Netherlands, the role of the Romanian Embassy in the Netherlands, obviously. And one with 3:30, Get Connected in the Netherlands. Get in touch with Anna from NRCC in order to register, or register directly on the Zoom link that she will post on the Facebook page. And thank you very much all for being here. Have a wonderful evening and happy holidays.
The same. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.